Hey everybody, this is Eric Rosedall from Phone to Action, and I'm joined with Dan Eckstein, partner at the Sajak Public Affairs Group. How are you doing, Dan?
I'm
How are you
great.
holding up in the
Thanks so much.
pandemic?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much. The sun is out in Bethesda, Maryland, so brighter days ahead.
Awesome. Okay, let's get going in the first in-session webinar. This webinar is designed for busy professionals, so we only have 15 minutes. There's no filler or fat here, so let's just get rolling. So today's theme is the evolution of advocacy, planning for the next 180 days. So what I'd really like to do is just let's talk about the lay of the land, what we know right now. So we know that there's going to be a general election coming up. We probably also are thinking that there's going to be some oversight and investigation in Congress and the state legislatures and local governments on COVID, on the pandemic. And there's going to be a continued policy debate on COVID. Dan, are you kind of thinking that's the same thing? Or we have everything here on what you're seeing?
Yeah, I think that's very much the case, and I think because Eric, to your point, there's so much happening in such a short amount of time. I appreciate this opportunity because there is probably value in providing some focus on the advocacy space. So, yes, I agree with you.
Okay. And I also wanted to, Helena, can you move the slide? Thanks. So I also wanted to take real quick something that is some of the trends that we're noticing at Phone to Action. Our excellent data team is tracking all this daily, and some of the trends that we're noticing is that during the pandemic, millions of emails and contacts are going into legislators. Facebook shares are up 400%. Social engagement is higher than it's ever been. Mobile engagement is 70% higher. People are taking action on phones. My generation, mine and Dan's generation, we're taking more action than ever. And the one thing is that every 2 seconds, an advocate is taking action to their legislators. So Dan, I mean, this really shows that people are concerned and they want to reach out to their elected officials. Are you kind of hearing that in your space with your clients too?
They absolutely, and in fact, as I've talked to a number of folks in the corporate space, some of the association space, the online forums that they're hosting now, that some were doing, some were not doing as well as they would have liked to, or as many as they were doing, but are increasing it. They're seeing tremendous responses from their fellow employees or their members. So there is definitely an appetite for advocacy and
Awesome.
information.
Yeah. Okay. So why everybody's here? Let's get into the main event. Okay, we've got 5 tactics that we've put together for everybody, and we're going to roll through these in 15 minutes and maybe get to some questions at the end. So, are you ready to rock this, Daniel?
Let's do it. So,
all right. What
Eric, again,
are the 5 tactics that we can give our listeners today?
Totally. Eric, thanks again. Hi, everybody. So I'm going to hit them quickly, and then I'm going to sort of talk through them with some thoughts, for each one. But the number one, right? Identify your advocacy value proposition, or AVP. Number 2, determine your battle plan for the next 180 days. Number 3, respect but don't get caught up in your organization's culture. Number 4, serious programs require a serious ask. And number 5, now is the time. So Eric, what I'll do is I'm going to sort of flesh out the first one, and then if we want to talk a second or two about each one, we can do that.
Sure. Advocacy value proposition. What do people need to do?
So the way I view the advocacy value proposition, frankly, is, and this is a suggestion to all the folks listening in, is to really try to understand the metrics that show how your organization's lobbying, grassroots and or PAC or campaign finance activities combined are helping move the needle during this, critical time. Obviously, for all of us, there is a lot of emotion and noise out there. And frankly, there'd be a lot of emotion and noise regardless of whether there was a pandemic or not, right? So really the best way to show your organization and your advocacy program's value will always be through the data. Being able to measure your outreach activities, I think will always help reinforce the power of your mission and your message. So I view, Eric, the advocacy value proposition is really the index, right? The index number for success in this regard. So it could be comprised of a series of measures like, for example, the number of Zoom meetings that you're holding with stakeholders, the number, for those that are on the phone to action platform, the number of campaigns and messages that are being distributed, measurements on the public voting record of candidates and how that lines up with sort of the actions that your organization's taking, whatever really the data points that you have or think you need to have to really show to your leadership teams that the advocacy is making a difference in this period of time. So,
Yeah, I
Eric, if
agree
it's
with you
go ahead.
100%. Yeah, I think what you're saying is data. Your data is gold, right? It tells you where you're strong and you're weak. It's also going to tell you where to put your resources. I mean, I think you really hit it right on the head. Is use your data because like Capitol Hill is closed, state capitals are closed, right? So this is using the data will kind of tell you where to go, right?
Right, totally. In fact, if I can, let me give the listeners a homework assignment. So over the next 2 days, if you haven't already, take out a sheet of paper and identify the activities that you're doing now, basically, right? And even think about like what you're collecting or what you should collect, right? Eric, to your earlier point when we spoke about this, what is the data audit? Right now, if you're not running campaigns, if you're not sure what to do, this is a good time to sort of make sure that the data that you'd like to show or to have or to measure, that you have that in place. And places, I would assume, Eric, for example, phone to action, I know has a dashboard, for
Yep.
example.
It tells you everything you need to know on your advocacy. Yep.
Yeah, so it's definitely something where you can use those to come up with whatever that metric may be.
Awesome.
Should I go right to battle
Let's
plan?
move on. Let's go. Set your
So
battle plan for the next 180 days.
Yeah, so obviously, as you mentioned, and it's true, right? The ground has shifted and continues to shift in our space and for everybody, right? So I know it's a bit sort of mundane to say it, but of course, whatever plans that we put in place and all the good thought that we had, going into 2020, and I would say even through early March, right? All of that is, just different now. So without spending too much time on sort of the context, because that makes sense, I think it's sort of obvious. Let me go right to the homework assignment, right? So in all these points, these 5 points are meant to build on each other. So over the coming week, right, after you've sort of sat down and thought about the data that you want to collect or that you're collecting and how best to measure it, I would try to map out as best as you can between now and November or December on almost a weekly basis. What are the, well, for all intents and purposes, what is the hand to hand combat activities that you and your organization are going to do between literally today and the end of this week to help advance the mission, right? Who needs to call who? What messages have to go out? What sort of communications need to be prepared? And I would take that information and I would not only share it with your management team, but I would seek some sort of, whether it's a weekly assessment of the action plan or battle plan, whatever the right check-in time is within some frequency, so that you have the ability to stay nimble. I mean, there are a number of associations that I work with, and Eric, I'm sure a number of your clients on the phone to action platform, that they're frankly meeting daily, right? So
all the time. Yep.
yes, so
And we're working with them all the time, on their plans and updating and moving the needle. Yep.
Exactly. So I think this is really, tactically, it's probably not fair to think too far beyond the next week or two, because you need to be prepared to sort of be opportunistic where it's possible.
Right. I mean, it's not the 2020 that you planned on, right? Like
Exactly.
No one planned for this pandemic, but now that you're here, you can't stop. You got to keep moving, right? So build a roadmap, come up with a 100-day, assess, use your data. I think that's brilliant. So why don't we keep moving, because we're on a tight time frame here.
Yeah.
What's next? You said respect and don't get caught up in the culture. What are you talking about here?
Culture is my favorite part. So there's a famous, for many of you probably that have done some business reading, Peter Drucker is a very well-known management consultant, and he basically, his line is, culture eats strategy for breakfast. So I say that because it rings true today, of course. I mean, what I'm trying to say here is, and Eric, you and I, we work with lots of folks in the corporate side, the association side, non-for-profits that, obviously culture is paramount.
Yeah,
However, during a pandemic, right, if there are existential battles ahead, then I would really encourage, the folks listening in, if they are getting caught in the gray, in regards
yeah,
to culture, that I would encourage them to try to, as best as they can, try to get out of that. Right? I
yeah,
mean, don't not letting the culture be the reason to hold people back. So let me
yeah,
give a specific example, if I
sure,
may. So
yeah,
I live well, I work in my office is in Washington D.C.
yeah,
I use Uber. I do remember at times that when Uber was sort of going against, for example, or working, in opposition to some of the taxi cab commission proposals that were trying to take them out of business,
yeah,
I would get messages from Uber saying, "Hey, help be a voice if you like our platform." And so I think about that in the tech space because going to customers for more traditional corporations. I work for banks, and a lot of
yeah,
sort of traditional businesses are hesitant, for example, to go to their customer base, or for some associations to go to their broader stakeholder community. I'm not
yeah.
suggesting that that's the path. I'm just suggesting that everything should be on the table, and if there's an
Yeah.
existential battle, they should think about it.
I think that's awesome. Well, one, Uber's a phone action client. We love working with them, and we help work with them in municipalities in the states and with the Congress. But I've got another great example of getting out of the gray is Pfizer was on a conference webinar with us last week, and they were talking about how their employees came to the leadership and said, "We want to help. We want to get the message out there." And so Pfizer put together a video about how employees can socially share the message on social media, which they've never done before, right? They also got 15,000 employees to sign up to get information about the pandemic, to get real facts. And so, like, that's kind of what you're talking about, is getting out of that gray. Like, okay, this isn't what we usually do, but we've got we've got employees that want to help, and we've got the tools to do it. So let's get out of that gray. So
Exactly.
let's keep moving. So your next one is serious programs require serious action.
Yeah, so this is something that I comes, I guess, from a bit of my experiences. Um, you really, and I know that this could, to some extent, be considered, if you're just sort of looking at it cold, that, oh, this is a request for more budget. Well, that's not really what this is. This is really part of that exercise that we talked about from the first couple steps, which is mapping out the metrics you need, making sure you have the battle plan in place, and to some extent, you really do want to make sure that you have the resources that you need to be successful, to help your organizations, sort of, win the day, if you will. It
Yep.
doesn't always mean budget, though it may. There may be things. So what do I mean by that? Do you have the right folks on your leadership? Are they primed? Are they trained? Are they ready to take action for you on your behalf? Are there other important stakeholders that need to be aware of what you're doing and how you're doing things and can be at the ready as well? Yes. Do you have the right tools in place, right? And if you have a number of tools, both in-house and probably some outside tools as well, like phone to action, are those tools
Yep.
optimized, right? Are they
Yep.
are they being used properly, right? Are they ready to go? So as you
Yeah,
think
I
about,
agree with you 100%. It's like
yeah,
what we're noticing is, like, texting 99% open rate and activation rate. Like, clearly the market is dictating, like, texting is a key advocacy tool. That may be a great way. Or legislators are looking for authentic stories, allowing your employees to tell their story through campaigns. Like, really trying to find those tools to let let your advocates, your customers, your top supporters tell your story, help tell your story. So we're running into that window. How do we wrap this up? So now is the time, right, Dan?
Yeah, and that this is a quick one, right? Because this is obvious. So the question back to you, Eric, and really to the folks that are listening in is, if now is not the time, well, then when?
Right.
Right, with the pregnant pause, because obviously it's never easy to sort of make asks and to go forward, but we are, as we're all saying, going through this very unique time. A lot of us are helping our, basically the survival of our missions and our organizations to some extent. I know that sounds dramatic, but I think that's happening. And so if you're not going to engage, I don't know when else you would. So.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. It's like it's a no-brainer, right? If you like the data is bearing fruit, right? Millions of Americans are taking action right now, and they want to tell their story. They're scared or they're nervous about their job or their employment, whatever. They want to help. So give them the tools. And on the flip side, on the reverse side, is elected officials, they want to hear that story. They want real stories. They don't want, they don't want to hear from a traditional, they can't hear from a traditional lobbyist. They want to hear from their constituents. And so I think now you're exactly right. Now is the time to lean in on that passion and that excitement. So we did it, Dan. We ran through all 5 in 15 minutes.
Yep.
What is your ADP? How do you map out your battle plan? Don't get caught up in culture. Serious programs require serious asks. Now is the time. Do we have anything that we want to close this out on real quick? Do you have any closing statements or thoughts?
Be bold.
Be bold. Awesome. All right. Well, this was a quick 15-minute webinar. I'd like to thank Dan. Dan, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
If you have more questions or would like to have some follow-up conversations with me or Dan, you can email us at Eric or erosedal@phonetoaction.com or dan@sajak.com. Again, thank you for your time, and we look forward to talking to you in the future. Thank you.